Thank you, Senator McAllister. It being 2 p.m, we'll move to questions without notice. Senator Dodson.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Ruston. I refer to the fact that 5 out of the 7 closing the gap targets have not been met or are not on track. Will one of the 14 new targets set in April be a justice target?
The Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Senator Dodson, for your question, all the more pertinent because it is today. In relation to the new targets that will be set following the consultation with the peaks and through the COAG process, obviously will be something that I'm more than happy to take on notice and ask the Minister for Indigenous Australians to respond to the specifics of the last part of your question. However, if I could say more broadly in relation to closing the gap, I think everybody in this place, on this side, on that side, on the crossbenches and in the other place, accept the fact that today the update on the closing the gap targets was not what we would have liked to have seen. However, I can assure this place and I can assure all Australians, Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians, that this government is absolutely committed to working with Indigenous Australians on closing the gap to make sure that every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander in this country grows up with the same opportunities as every other Australian. We also understand that the progress that we've made over the previous decade has not been successful, and I think today everybody has acknowledged the reason that it hasn't been successful is because it has been a top-down approach by governments of different persuasions and in different places, both here in Canberra and around Australia. But today probably heralds one of the most important changes, and that is a change in the approach to how we are intending to approach addressing the closing the gap targets and initiatives. And that is by greater consultation with Indigenous Australians and starting to build the way that we approach this by being informed and consulted and being designed by Indigenous Australians. So whilst today has not been the day that we would have liked to have seen, where we had seen significant improvement in the gap and the closing the gap indicators, I think we can celebrate the fact that we have acknowledged we haven't done well in the past and we must do better in the future.
Senator Dodson, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. 2 years ago, the First Nations peoples delivered the Uluru Statement from the Heart and offered a clear pathway forward. Will the Morrison government hold a referendum in this term to enshrine a First Nations voice to Parliament in the Constitution?
What a great
Senator
question.
Ruston.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Senator Dodson, for your question. The one thing that the government has absolutely given a categorical commitment on is to work with First Australians to make sure that whatever is designed and whatever is developed, as we move forward in recognition of ongoing recognition of Indigenous Australians, is that it will be informed by a co-design process where Indigenous Australians and Indigenous communities are absolutely at the forefront of that design process. In fact, I just met with the head of the Peaks to talk to them about specific initiatives that sit within my portfolio area so that we can make sure that what we're doing is being far better informed about what Indigenous Australians want, because the only way that we're going to get a successful outcome in closing the gaps going forward is making sure that the design of the methods by which we go about closing that gap are being designed by our Indigenous Australians.
Senator Dodson, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. If the government has ruled out enshrining a voice to Parliament in the Constitution, what form of constitutional change is the government proposing?
Senator Ruston.
Look, thank you very much, Senator Dodson. What I'd like to really reiterate is the fact that this is an iterative process. It's a process of co-design, and the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Ken Wyatt, has made it very, very clear that he intends to continue to work in a collaborative way with all Australians, but particularly with Indigenous Australians, about our pathway forward on constitutional recognition and how the voices of Indigenous Australians are going to be heard into the future. But today, as we celebrate the new way forward, and we acknowledge the bad outcomes of the past, today we are talking about moving forward in a new way with Indigenous Australians to make sure that the process of closing the gap is informed by Indigenous Australians. We can't shy away from the fact that the results today have not been what we accepted, what we would have wanted. I am not shying away from that. The Prime Minister doesn't shy away from that. The Minister for Indigenous Australians does not shy away from the fact the results today were not good.
Time for the answers expired. Senator Brockman.
My question is to the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Birmingham. Can the Minister update the Senate on the Peru-Australia Free Trade Agreement and how it will benefit Australian exporters, manufacturers, farmers and businesses?
The Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Brockman for his question, his advocacy, particularly for regional Australians and Australian farming businesses in terms of access under our free trade network of agreements. Indeed, overnight, the Peru-Australia Free Trade Agreement entered into force. This is a very strongly negotiated positive agreement for Australia, with over 99% of all tariffs on Australian goods to Peru ultimately being eliminated, expanding on the outcomes that were negotiated as part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Peru has been one of the fastest growing economies in Latin America and at times the world over the last decade. And while Peru is relatively unknown to many Australian exporters in terms of the details, it has a gross domestic product comparable to that of Vietnam. It has high rates of GDP growth and a population in excess of 31 million people. Peru provides a similar consumer base to that of Malaysia, a long-standing trade partner of Australia's. This FTA places Australia in a strong position to be able to share in Peru's continued economic growth, providing opportunities that will expand our engagement into the future. PAFTA provides new opportunities to Australian farmers, with zero tariffs on beef within 5 years under PAFTA, giving the same access into Peru as US farmers already have. PAFTA provides our sugar farmers better access to sell sugar than Peru has provided to any other sugar exporting country in the last 20 years. Australian dairy farmers have historic new access to Peru with zero tariffs from day one under PAFTA for 7,000 tonnes initially, increasing to 10,000 tonnes of product. Immediate duty-free access for Australian wine, sheep meat, most horticulture products, kangaroo meat and wheat under PAFTA. Manufacturers benefit, as do our services and education sector, all with improved access outcomes thanks to the entry into force of PAFTA overnight.
Senator Brockman, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Minister, for that answer. Minister, how has industry reacted to the Peru-Australia Free Trade Agreement?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, yes indeed, very excited. Thanks, Senator Whish-Wilson. The Queensland sugar industry, Senator Watt, has said they expect Australia to be able to fill 30,000 tonnes of duty-free sugar access to Peru. That's the initial quota that is provided for, which grows over time. Cane Growers Australia have said they expect the deal will deliver an extra $13.5 million to cane farmers alone. The Red Meat Advisory Council has described PAFTA as an exciting new opportunity in the Latin American meat market, and they've noted that the forecast is for Peruvian beef consumption to triple by 2020 and sheep meat consumption to increase by 20% by 2025. And of course, the new market access there provides opportunities for Australian producers to seize large parts of that forecast growth. Energy markets, the Latin American Business Council and others have all welcomed the opportunities this provides for deeper business integration and growth in exports.
Senator Birmingham. Senator Brockman, a final supplementary question.
Can the Minister advise the Senate how the government is supporting Australian exporters and creating more opportunities for them, and how does improved trade help build a stronger economy and create more Australian jobs?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr President. We are able to deliver these trade agreements thanks to continued effort, negotiation and outcomes by our government, but I note also from bipartisan support in terms of the passage of these agreements through the chamber. And that's critically important, Mr President, that we maintain that and recognise the growth and the dividend it's delivering to Australia. More Australian businesses are exporting today as a result of the trade agreements we have negotiated. For more than 53,000 small and medium enterprises exporting today, which has grown some 18.5% in terms of the number of businesses exporting in our time in government. More Australians are employed in trade-related businesses. Trade and exports are generating more jobs for Australians, some 240,000 trade-related jobs have been created, it's estimated, over the last 5 years. Australian household incomes are estimated to be higher, an average of $8,500 higher as a result of trade access around the world. More jobs, more businesses, higher incomes, thanks to our export markets.
Order. Senator Walsh.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Senator Birmingham. Yesterday in Senate question time, the Minister said, and I quote, "The government is not funding a new coal-fired power station." Former Resources Minister Senator Canavan has been reported as interjecting, and I quote, "Not yet." Will the minister rule out appeasing the latest tantrum from Nationals like Senator Canavan by providing taxpayers' money for new coal-fired power generation?
Order. 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 I'm not going to ask for any withdrawal about any language. I'm just going to urge senators to be careful about reflecting on the behaviour of other senators with terms. I thought I heard. Yes, Senator Wong.
Just to clarify, the tantrum quote was from an unnamed Liberal Party source that was in a question yesterday.
That's not a point of order. I'm just urging senators to not get into the zone about that potentially calls upon me to ask for withdrawals upon reflection. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, I think I've seen one or two tantrums in this chamber. Usually looking straight opposite here. Stop smiling, Senator Wong. You really shouldn't let yourself be caught out like that. But certainly not from any colleagues distinguished colleagues in the National Party, Mr. President. Mr. President.
Order.
I would reiterate firstly in relation to the senator's question. I would reiterate in relation to the senator's question that which I said yesterday. What the government is doing is precisely what the government took to the last election. We promised $10 million of funding for feasibility study. The feasibility studies are looking at 2 different projects in relation to the Queensland energy markets. That's what we're funding. That's what we're doing. Nothing more, nothing less. There are no further policy decisions that have been taken to take that any further at this stage. Those matters, of course, all depend upon seeing whether or not cases stack up. And if cases stack up, well then, in large part, it will be a matter to see what private sector reaction there is to funding cases that stack up in relation to energy markets. In terms of energy markets in Australia, and with a question about the former Minister for Resources, who I know has played a big role in terms of energy policy as well, I note that not only is Australia a country where at present our emissions are going down, but also importantly where prices are going down. And a critical part for Australia in terms of this government's policy focus is to make sure we have lower emissions, higher reliability, but lower prices for Australians as well. And wholesale energy prices have dropped in recent times, in some cases by up to 35% in terms of reductions in wholesale energy prices. The wholesale energy prices for the national electricity market for the last quarter of last year were at the lowest level in years, Mr. President. That's what it's about, getting lower prices while making sure we have the reliability and emissions reductions we promised.
Senator Walsh, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proponents of the Collinsville coal-fired power station are seeking a taxpayer-funded indemnity. Will the minister rule out providing a taxpayer-funded indemnity?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, Mr. President, as I just said in the answer to the first question, and again what I said yesterday as well, the government's very clear about what it is we are doing. And they are feasibility studies, Mr. President. Feasibility studies, business cases that will look into these projects. And of course, for business cases and feasibility studies, if they stack up, then you would expect to see investment that will flow in relation to projects that stack up. That is how the commercial market works. We identified in the last election that, in relation to those regions of Queensland, there are questions about the reliability of energy. There are pressures in terms of the affordability of energy. These are issues, it seems, that the Queensland State Labor government has happily overlooked over a period of time.
Order. Senator Watt rose first.
On relevance. The question was clearly about a taxpayer-funded indemnity, and we haven't heard anything about that point from the minister.
On the point of order, I cannot instruct the minister how to answer a question, nor to use a particular word. I believe the minister is being directly relevant if he is talking about funding arrangements for this. He doesn't have to use a word that is used in the question. It is not appropriate, however, to talk about state government policies in this space and be directly relevant. Senator Wong.
Well, on the point of order, I'm not clear what you've ruled, Mr President, but I would just draw to your attention the only aspect of funding that was asked about was a taxpayer-funded indemnity.
No, I appreciate that, Senator Wong, and I've ruled that discussion of matters of state government policy in this regard that aren't directly related to funding of this particular issue that's been raised in the question are not directly relevant. I have been listening carefully to the minister's answer, and I do believe he was being directly relevant, talking about funding arrangements for this particular project. I can't instruct him how to answer a question or to use a particular word in the answer, but it was a specific question, so the answer must relate to funding. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I know those opposite seem to want us to preempt the outcome of feasibility studies or business cases. And of course their mates in the Queensland State Government didn't even support such work happening. We are standing on what we took to the election,
Senator
delivering
time
that
for the
at this point in
has
time.
expired. Senator Walsh, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Yesterday the minister ruled out government funding for a new coal-fired power station. Why did the Prime Minister yesterday fail to rule out providing an indemnity which the Australian Industry Group says could cost taxpayers $17 billion?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, I won't accept the words that the senator tries to put into my mouth about what I said yesterday. What I said yesterday is on the Hansard record.
Order.
What I said yesterday is on the Hansard record, and it should all be read entirely in context. What I said yesterday very clearly was the government is funding feasibility study business cases into 2 projects, $10 million, as we promised at the election. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, are we currently funding a coal-fired power station? No, we're not. That's a statement of fact. We are funding precisely what we promised. This is about making sure that when it comes to reliability and affordability of energy, to be able to support industry in areas of Queensland, our government is willing to make sure that industry has the energy that it needs and is working through the process to make sure that investors have the information they need to make informed decisions to support those jobs in Queensland. And I'm surprised that a Queensland senator would be raising such concerns about jobs
Senator
in
Birmingham.
Queensland.
Senator, order. I have order. I'll call you when there's silence, Senator Waters. Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to the Minister for Trade and Investment, representing the Minister for Energy and Emissions Increases. Reputex have reported today—
Order. Senator Waters, I'm going to insist that the correct titles of ministers are used. Please don't do that again. Senator Waters.
So noted. Thank you, President. Reputex have reported today that emissions from gas production are a mind-boggling 621% above 2005 levels. Industrial emissions are also up 60%, driven by the huge amounts of energy required to liquefy gas for LNG export. Gas is wiping out all of the gains of renewable energy. Why are you pretending gas is our saviour?
The Minister representing the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President, and I thank Senator Waters for her question about the role of gas exports in terms of Australia's emissions profile. It is correct, as Senator Waters indicates, that exports of gas and liquefaction of gas for export have contributed in that sector to an increase in Australia's emissions profile, while other areas that I note Senator Waters doesn't talk about in terms of a reduction in our emissions across our own domestic energy consumption lead ultimately to a net reduction in Australia's emissions. But let's deal particularly with the question Senator Waters raises, which is about Australian export of gas to the rest of the world. Now, Senator Cormann has outlined in answers recently about the role that Australian coal can play relative to coal from other countries that is less efficient than Australian coal and that creates more emissions when it is burnt. Gas, of course, plays an even bigger role in terms of emissions reduction as a transition fuel in other countries. So the important role that the LNG sector plays is not just as a contributor to Australia's exports, but also as a fuel source for other nations, helping them to get the reliable energy and power that they need, but also often as a substitute fuel source as they transition in their economies, sometimes transitioning away from coal, sometimes transitioning away from nuclear energy due to other factors, which I know the Greens also oppose. But of course, you're coming in here now criticising Australian gas exports as contributing to Australia's emissions, but ignoring the fact that those same gas exports may well be reducing by a far greater sum the emissions profile of the countries that they're going to. Now, this is the whole failure of the argument put by some others in this place, Mr President. Emissions are a global challenge. Australia plays our role, but we also have to look at the global picture, and in this case, where we can provide more efficient sources of energy to other countries, we ought—
Time for the answers expired. Senator Waters, a supplementary question.
Yeah, thanks, President. Minister, you're essentially saying that our gas is being substituted for coal. Can you please tell me which countries are now burning gas instead of coal, and how much each country has substituted, and how many tonnes of emissions have been reduced? Or is it the case that in fact these countries are now burning gas as well as coal, and you're just spouting fossil fuel industry talking points?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr President. I don't know whether Senator Waters wants a policy that basically limits the energy consumption of other countries, but the truth is many countries within our region have increasing energy needs. That is a subset of increasing populations, higher living standards, fewer people living in poverty, a whole range of factors that are driving the growth of living standards. And thank you, Senator McGrath. Yes, indeed. Fewer people living in poverty, more people enjoying higher living standards are a good thing. Increased energy consumption is part of that. Now, they could have chosen to use more domestic coal sources in some of those
Senator
cases.
Waters, on a point of order.
Thanks, President. Look, my question was a specific one about the substitution claim that you've made, asking you to provide evidence of that, and I haven't heard that being addressed yet. But it's obviously central to the government's argument, and they should
Senator Waters,
substantiate
you've made
those
your
claims,
point of order.
even though they won't be able—
You've made your point of order. It's not a time for argument. You did, at the conclusion, ask for specifics, but you made an assertion at the start as well. The minister is allowed to expound upon that assertion and be directly relevant. Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, the point I was making is that these countries have got growing energy needs. So, indeed, they may be pursuing, in many cases, gas as an alternative to where they might have instead used domestic coal reserves if they have them, alternate coal reserves were they able to access them, even Australian coal potentially. But they've chosen to use
Senator
LNG.
Birmingham, time for the answer has expired. Senator Waters, a final supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, President. The government has signalled that it will take a 2050 target to the UN meeting in Glasgow, but the UN's climate scientists say that catastrophic tipping points will be reached if we don't halve pollution in the next decade. Will the government's pledge for a tiny 3.9% reduction over 10 years be lifted so that our national aspirations are in line with the science?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, our commitment in terms of the 26 to 28% reduction by 2030 commitment is, in terms of per capita terms, one of the most significant commitments made in the world. In terms of by GDP terms, it's a significant reduction of Australia's emissions intensity, again far greater than commitments made by most other nations around the world. Australia goes forward determined to meet those targets and, as the Prime Minister and I and others have repeatedly said, to beat those commitments we've made for the 2030 horizon. Our ambition ought to be to beat them by as comfortable a margin, if not more, than the way in which we are already beating and forecast to beat our 2020 targets, which is a substantial excess that Australia has managed to achieve in relation to the 2020 targets, and the ambitions we take forward by backing technology and technological change in Australia that can help to drive technological change overseas is about making sure we do successfully beat those targets.
Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck. Can the minister outline how the Morrison government's plan to build a stronger economy is helping to ensure that young Australians are given the best opportunities to succeed?
Order. Order. The Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you to Senator Chandler for her question. Mr President, the Coalition strives to ensure maximum opportunity for younger Australians with the best available opportunities in education, employment and most appropriate assistance for those who require some help or are in a crisis. The government's focus is for young people to support them to be healthy, active and engaged participants in society and the economy. Mr President, as our first step, we've established a youth task force, and as Minister, one of the most enlightening things, most enjoyable things as part of my portfolio, Mr President, has been actually engaging with young people and the organisations that represent them. Organisations such as Youth Activating Youth, Mr President, an organisation based out of Victoria who is assisting disadvantaged multicultural young Australians to re-engineer their lives and their commitments based in Victoria. Year 13, a socially driven organisation connecting young Australians with all of the options available after high school and beyond. And Mr President, today we welcome the winners of the Haywire Regional Youth Program that's being conducted by the ABC to the Parliament, and one of the real pleasures has been to hear their ideas, their stories and how we can work with them to improve Australia and their activities. At the end of last year, Mr President, I announced that we would fund the 2020 Australian Youth Development Index. The Australian Youth Affairs Council will undertake this work, and it is essential, Mr President, to provide key information to inform the evidence on the status of youth development in Australia.
Senator Chandler, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. And as the youngest woman in this place, I found the minister's response quite enlightening. Can the minister...
Order. Order.
Can the minister...
Order. Stop the clock. Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister please update the Senate how the government is creating more jobs for young Australians?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Again, thanks Senator Chandler for a question. Mr President, the Australian government is focused on getting more young Australians off welfare and into work. We recognise that the best way to do that is to build a strong economy that enables employers to be more productive, more competitive, more innovative and to create more job opportunities. And as Senator Birmingham has just said, the bringing into force of the Peru Free Trade Agreement overnight is just one of those initiatives. Mr President, we've funded the Youth Jobs Path program, which Labor fought tooth and nail. They opposed. And more than 88,500 young people, Mr President, have participated, with 56,000 of them getting a job. 56,000 of them getting a job. $580 million, Mr President, through the Transitions to Work program to allow disadvantaged young people to help with them.
Order, Senator Colbeck. Time for the answer has expired. Senator Chandler, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, what action has the government taken to address youth mental health?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr President, I think this is one of the— thank you, Senator Chandler. This is one of the signature initiatives of the coalition government, $509 million youth mental health and suicide prevention plan, the largest suicide prevention strategy in Australia's history. We all talk about our aspiration to get suicide to zero, and this government is actually investing in that. And we've done that also off the back of the bushfire tragedy that's been occurring in South East Australia recently. So we've put $8 million to extend Beyond Blue's BU mental health in education program for schools for those who are involved in recovery of the bushfire. We put an extra $4.4 million to fast-track the establishment of a new headspace in Batemans Bay. Our government is ensuring Australians and their families get access to the best care and support when they need it.
Senator Kitching.
President, my question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Yesterday, the minister suggested footage contained in a Liberal Party advertisement had been obtained from, and I quote, a gallery of photos available on the website for people to download and use. The Department of Defence's website clearly states that materials provided can only be reproduced in an, and I quote, unaltered form. Why did the Liberal Party's advertisement contain footage in breach of the Department of Defence's policy?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President, and I sincerely thank Senator Kitching for that question, because for two reasons. One, it allows me to answer your question I took on notice yesterday, and also add some more information in terms of your question today. An authorisation line, as you know, so coming to the question from yesterday, is required on material produced by a member or senator under Australian law. Any multimedia material created with reference to ADF assistance to the bushfire response was designed to inform the community about what the Commonwealth Government was doing. The purpose of the material was also to communicate as simply and as helpfully as we possibly could.
Senator Watt, I'm taking a point of order. Senator Watt, on a point of order.
On relevance, I don't know if we're in a time machine. This was yesterday's question. We'd actually like an answer to today's question. Completely different question.
I'm happy to rule on the point of order if there's silence. Order. I'm listening. Oh, sorry, Senator Cormann. I was about to rule.
On the point of order, the senator actually directly referenced the question that was asked yesterday in his question today. So I would have thought that the way the minister is answering is absolutely directly relevant to the question as asked.
Senator Wong, on the point of order.
Mr. President.
I'll take Senator Wong's point of order and then I'll rule.
Mr. President, if the minister wishes to add to an answer from yesterday because her answer was incomplete, there is the
order.
The usual convention is to do so after question time.
So, on the point of order, the question did reference yesterday's question. The minister is allowed to be directly relevant by referencing yesterday's question. However, there is a more appropriate time to explicitly add to answers in yesterday's question time, which is usually at the conclusion of question time. I'm listening carefully to the minister's answer, and I'll call upon her to continue. She has 1.5 minutes remaining.
Well, further to your question yesterday, as we've just discussed, and also directly relevant to this question today, Defence was not tasked to provide any imagery or footage for the material, and there is a significant amount of footage of ADF activity in the public domain. And conveniently, when I was researching this issue yesterday, I found some social media from the Australian Labor Party authorised by Mr Wright, and guess what? It shows ADF troops. So it asked me the question, well, where did you get this material from?
Senator Reynolds, Senator Wong, on a point of order. I'm going to allow order.
That's the best you can do.
I'm going to make
you're
one observation.
You're a minister of the Crown. That's the best you can do.
Order everywhere. Order. I don't spontaneously draw ministers to the standing orders, so I call upon a point of order rather than do it assume. Yep. On this question, it is relevant for the minister to talk about footage and the footage used in the advertisement referred to. I don't believe it is directly relevant to refer to something of another party that may or may not have been at a very different time. There are opportunities to debate the merits of questions and answers after question time, and there are other opportunities to bring such matters to the attention of the Senate. Senator Reynolds.
Mr President, I've answered the question. Defence was not tasked to provide any imagery or footage of for that material that you referenced.
Senator Wong, on the point of order.
Direct relevance. The Senator Kitching's question went to the question of why the Liberal Party's footage breached the Defence Department's policy.
And that was
not a question about whether the Defence Department tasked the footage,
no,
which is the way the minister construed the question.
I think, with respect, all right, I'll let Senator Cormann rule.
I mean, Minister Reynolds is able to answer questions in relation to her portfolio. Minister Reynolds is not in a position to answer questions on behalf of the Liberal Party.
Order. Can I just rule on the? I'll just rule on the point of order. With respect, Senator Wong, that last part of the question you did accurately reflect what Senator Kitching said. However, I do believe if the minister is directly addressing issues around the footage or how it was obtained, I do, with respect, think that is a matter that is directly relevant. I can't instruct her how to answer the question, and I remind senators that there is an opportunity to debate the merits of answers afterwards. Senator Reynolds.
Just for total clarity, Mr President, I did directly answer the question when I said Defence was not tasked to provide any imagery or footage of the material, and there is a significant amount of footage of ADF activity in the public domain, which I pointed out that the Labor Party has also accessed over the years. So I could not be clearer, Mr President.
Order. Senator Kitching. Senator Kitching's on her feet.
Well,
Senator Kitching, a supplementary question.
Firstly, Mr President, on a point of order, relevance to the question I asked.
Senator Kitching, sorry.
Am I getting today's answer tomorrow?
Senator Kitching, Senator Reynolds has concluded her answer. It is not appropriate to raise a point of order once a minister has concluded their answer about direct relevance. Senator
The department's website also clearly states material cannot be used, and I quote, without specific written authorisation from the Department of Defence. When and from whom was permission obtained by the Liberal Party?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, Senator Kitching, as Senator Cormann has pointed out, I am the Minister for Defence, and I answered the defence aspects of that question.
Order.
That we
Senator
were not
Wong
tasked,
on the point of order. I've got Senator Wong on a point of order. Senator Wong. Order. I've got Senator Wong on her feet. Senator Wong.
Direct relevance. We are asking the Minister for Defence about the application of defence policy, that is, the written authorisation.
Senator Cormann on the point of order.
On the point of order, the minister was being directly relevant to her portfolio responsibilities. She made very clear what the matters relevant to defence were. The minister is not in a position she does not represent the Liberal Party in this chamber. She represents the defence portfolio.
On the point of order, two matters. On the point of order, two matters. Firstly, the minister had been speaking for 8 seconds. I find it hard to believe that unless there is an egregious breach, I can call a minister with 8 seconds to a point of direct relevance. So I need to allow the minister to complete a sentence or two. With respect, the statement that immediately prior to my memory the point of order was raised, the minister made an observation referencing an answer earlier, a comment earlier by the Leader of the Government. I don't believe that is not. I believe that making that observation can still be directly relevant. The point of order goes to the merits of an answer, which is not in the capacity of the chair, nor is it in the capacity of the chair to direct a minister how to answer a question as long as they're directly relevant. So I'll call the minister to continue, noting she has 52 seconds remaining.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And just to be extremely clear, I will say it again. I am the Minister for Defence, and I'm answering the defence aspects of this. Yes, there is a policy on the website. Defence was not tasked to provide any imagery or footage of the material. There is a significant amount of footage in the public domain, which is regularly accessed by many. And I will also point out that the question yesterday related to social media of the Prime Minister, which the question would be best directed to the Prime Minister's representative, and you're talking about the Liberal Party.
Senator Reynolds, please resume your seat. Senator Watt. Order. I'll call Senator Watt when I can hear him.
Point of order.
Senator Watt. Point of order.
The question is about the application of a policy of the Department of Defence. The only person who can answer that question is the Minister for Defence.
And Senator
she should be able to answer this.
Senator Watt, you make an observation that is not in the capacity of the chair to direct a minister how to answer a question. As long as the minister is being directly relevant, and I believe she was being directly relevant, even if some people don't like the answer, there are opportunities to debate that, but it is not for me to judge. Senator Reynolds, have you concluded your answer?
Mr President, I can repeat the answer as Minister for Defence again, but I think I've covered it adequately the last 3 or 4 times.
Senator, order. Senator Kitching is on her feet.
Lucky.
Senator Kitching.
Lucky we have estimates coming up. The department's website unambiguously states, and I quote, "This material cannot be used for political purposes or in a way contrary to Defence's apolitical standing." As Defence Minister, what action are you taking as a result of the breach of Department of Defence policy by the Liberal Party.
Senator Reynolds.
Well, I totally and utterly reject the statement, the premise of your question there. You are saying that there has been a breach. I have seen no evidence of a breach. You have demonstrated no evidence of a breach. I have suggested—
Order. Senator Watt.
I told you what the defence policy—
Order, Senator Reynolds. I have Senator Watt on a point of order.
Mr President—
and the point of order relates to?
Relevance. This whole series of questions is predicated on an answer the minister gave yesterday in which she said that this footage was obtained from Defence Department website.
Senator Watt,
That's the breach.
That's not it.
That's the
with
breach.
respect, there's a point of order, or you're attempting to make a point about the content of an answer. The minister was directly addressing an assertion contained in the question and is directly relevant if she is doing that. And in this case, the minister was entirely directly relevant, using, in fact, the same words contained in the question. As I remind senators, there's an opportunity to debate the merits of answers at other times. Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President. And as I said at the beginning of the first question, the question I took on notice yesterday was relevant, and I said that I took it on notice to get further information. I have provided further information as Minister for Defence, and it is very, very clear, as Minister for Defence, what the answer is.
Senator Rennick.
My question is to the Minister.
Order. Order.
My question is to the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. What steps is the Morrison government taking to support Australian jobs and build a stronger economy by ensuring small business get paid on time?
The Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Rennick for his question. And Mr President, cash flow is king for small business in so many ways. In the Morrison government, we are committed to backing our 3.4 million small and family businesses every step of the way. They employ almost 7 million Australians, and as we know, they are the lifeblood, they are the backbone of the local communities in which they are located. They also, though, play a very important role as suppliers and service providers to big businesses. And in fact, the trade between SMEs and big businesses is worth more than $550 billion per year. We're all aware of the saying, cash flow is king. And if we accept that saying, that cash flow is indeed king, then late payments to small businesses are a potential usurper to every small business in Australia. Mr President, the damage that late payments can inflict on small businesses in Australia cannot be understated. And that is why the government has put in place policies and is leading by example when it comes to ensuring that small businesses are paid promptly and are paid on time. You'll be aware that the government has introduced 20-day payment times for small businesses that have contracts with the government up to $1 million. And we believe that all governments should put in place these policies, and I'm very pleased that the states have agreed through the COAG process that cash flow is crucial to any small business and that all governments should lead the way in paying small businesses on time. We're also taking action to ensure that large businesses who want to do business with government, they will need to match our 20-day payment policy. Small and family businesses need to be paid on time,
Senator Cash.
and we are leading by example.
Has expired. Senator Rennick, a supplementary question.
What further actions is the government planning to take to support small business to get paid on time?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, we are introducing a new framework for reporting of large business payment times to small business suppliers. The government will shortly introduce legislation into the parliament that will require businesses with an annual turnover of over $100 million to publicly report how and when they pay their small business suppliers. This is all about improving payment outcomes for small businesses. We will release the exposure draft next week, and then we will introduce the legislation at the end of March. The payment times reporting framework will create transparency and will enable small businesses and indeed the Australian public to know how and when they will be paid by big business. And, Mr President, I do look forward to widespread support for these measures.
Senator Rennick, a final supplementary question.
Is the minister aware of any alternative approaches?
Senator Cash.
Unfortunately, Mr President, we are, because we know the policies that the Labor Party took to the election in relation to small business. And had those policies been implemented, they would have quite literally decimated small and family business in Australia. On this side of the chamber, though, we are committed to putting in place policies that will see our small and family businesses prosper, grow and create more jobs for Australians. And in particular, providing them with much-needed tax relief, something the Labor Party themselves don't believe in. We on this side of the chamber understand that the more money the small business has in their own back pocket, the more they are able to invest back into their own business, improving their access to finance, supporting small businesses with tax disputes, increasing their digital capability, but also an incredibly important measure, investing in the mental health of small business owners. They are the backbone of the Australian economy.
Order.
And we on
Senator
this side
Cash,
of the chamber.
time for the answer has expired. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Tourism, Senator Birmingham. Tourism, of course, brings millions of dollars into the Australian economy each year, with over 9.3 million tourists visiting each year alone, bringing an investment of $12.3 billion. Yet, because of these extreme fires, tourists have been leaving many of our favourite spots in droves, while businesses have had to lay off staff, businesses have had loss of income, and of course communities continue to suffer. Isn't it true that the only assistance that your government has offered to these businesses in bushfire-affected regions who are suffering because of this huge downturn in tourism is a concessional loan which puts business into more debt, or recovery grants which are only available to those who have been directly affected? Minister, does it take a burnt shopfront before your government will step in and help?
The Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Hanson-Young for her question, and indeed the government shares her concern for many businesses across Australia who are doing it tough at present. In the tourism sector, not just because of the bushfire impact. If Senator Hanson-Young consulted out across the tourism industry right around Australia, she would find there are tourism businesses well outside of bushfire-affected areas who faced consequences from the bushfires as a result of much of the misinformation and lies that were spreading on the internet or reported internationally about where the fire impacts were had. Equally, the coronavirus has had an impact and is having an impact now, not just on travel in Australia, but on global travel. And so we have a circumstance where tourism businesses right around the country are doing it tough. Those who are internationally facing and rely more upon global tourism markets are feeling particular pressures. Those, of course, directly in fire-affected regions, such as Kangaroo Island in our home state, Senator Hanson-Young, of course, those in New South Wales and Victoria, particularly those coastal communities, some of which I've visited, who rely upon the sort of 6-week period or so over Christmas for the bulk of their cash flow. Now, the government has provided for up to $500,000 in concessional loans, which you referenced in part, Senator Hanson-Young. Those concessional loans can assist businesses in a range of different ways in terms of how they structure themselves, including accessing capital during these tough times. Those concessional loans come at 0 interest for the first 2 years, are then apply at half of the bond rate thereafter. So these are highly concessional loans to help businesses who may not have the type of insurance products that some others do have to be able to see themselves through these tough times. But importantly, they also complement the efforts we're making to try to lift tourism again.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Hanson-Young, a supplementary question.
Well, thank you, Mr President. My supplementary question hopefully can get a bit more of a direct answer from the minister. Will the government reconsider the consequence of pushing small business in fire-affected communities into more debt, review the eligibility of the recovery grants and put more money on the table this year?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. The government has announced a $76 million package of support for the tourism industry, which is the largest single injection into the tourism industry, on top of a record budget for Tourism Australia. I acknowledge the work of state and territory governments of all political persuasions who are pursuing additional policies and programs and campaigns in terms of promoting their tourism industries. The government's been very clear all along that in terms of the $2 billion that we've committed to support bushfire recovery, that is an initial investment of $2 billion, and we will look at other ways in which we can provide for recovery and other support across communities. But I would caution Senator Hanson-Young and the Greens in terms of thinking that cash payments need be the ultimate answer to everything. In addition to the loans we spoke of before, the government's made decisions for those businesses in fire-affected regions about the lodgement of business activity statements, which will provide for
Senator
deferred
Birmingham.
payment
Time
around
for the
tax
answer
matters.
has expired. Senator Hanson-Young, final supplementary question.
Thank you. Does the government believe Who does the government believe deserves more taxpayer support? Fire-ravaged communities, small businesses, or your mates in the coal industry with an indemnity payment for a new coal-fired power plant?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr. President. I'm happy to bring together at least a couple of questions I've faced. I've already addressed in this chamber the $10 million for feasibility and business case studies into a coal-fired generation facility, potentially a high-efficiency one in Queensland, and, I'd note, a pumped hydro facility that is also being funded out of that same $10 million. It does stand somewhat in contrast, though, Mr. President, to the $2 billion, $2 billion with a B, Senator Hanson-Young, that we have committed towards the fire-affected communities and their recovery and support for them. So, Mr. President, I think it is very clear that this government's work in terms of supporting those fire-affected communities, whether it's the deployment of Defence Forces, the financial support and programs being supplied, not just in areas of tourism but of course in mental health, in wildlife recovery, a range of areas, is firmly delivering all they need. And we've been very clear,
Senator
if there is
Birmingham,
more, there will
for
be
the
more.
answer has expired. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the minister currently representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann. Sky News has reported that Liberal MPs—
Order. Senator Green.
Sky News has reported that Liberal MPs were concerned they wouldn't get all the money they wanted from government's corrupt sports rorts program, and the federal Liberal Party director assured them he would get onto it. What role did the federal Liberal Party play in the awarding of grants under the corrupt sports rorts program?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I thank Senator Green for that question. Let me just completely reject the premise of the question. The Sports Grants Program is a very popular, highly successful program where there was more demand than available resources. And of course, what Minister McKenzie did in reviewing the recommendations that were made by Sports Australia, she made sure that electorates represented by Labor members received a fairer share of the grants that were available. And if Minister McKenzie had not deployed her discretion and made judgments, the allocation of funding would have been more inappropriate. So, I think that is a matter of public record. I've said that on a number of occasions. Now, I have not personally been involved. I've not personally been involved in the decisions in relation to those projects. I mean, that obviously, appropriately, was a matter for the Minister for Sports. That is really all there is to it.
Senator Green, a supplementary question.
Thank you. One government MP said in relation to the Prime Minister's office and the Sports Grants program, and I quote, "Quite obviously his office and the party directors like Hursty would have been across trying to work out who gets what. Why was Mr Hertz involved?"
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm not aware that Mr Hertz was involved. I mean, I'm not in the habit of commenting on anonymous quotes, if indeed it is an accurate quote. Furthermore, what I would say is the Prime Minister has been very clear on the public record in relation to his involvement and the involvement of his office, and I've also made clear statements in relation to these matters, and I refer you to those previous statements.
Senator Green, a final supplementary question.
Which member of the Prime Minister's office discussed the awarding of grants under the Community Sports Infrastructure Program with the Federal Director of the Liberal Party?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I don't accept the premise of the question. The Prime Minister has been very clear on the involvement that his office has had in relation to these matters, and that was one of advocacy on behalf of members that approached.
Order. Senator Wong on a point of order.
Direct relevance. The question is which member of the staff?
With respect, the minister was being directly relevant to the answer. He's allowed to challenge an assumption or an assertion in the question. Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The involvement of the Prime Minister's office has been well documented. The Prime Minister's office, consistent with Prime Minister's offices in time immemorial, made representations on behalf of members of Parliament, and that is entirely appropriate.
Senator Scarr.
Mr. President, my question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the minister update the Senate how the Morrison government is continuing to strengthen the Australian defence industry?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Scarr, for that question. And also, I'd like to acknowledge your engagement and support for Queensland industry. Thank you. Australia's burgeoning defence industry is essential to ADF operations, and also it's critical to generating the capability we need here to protect Australia and our nation's interests. And because of the Morrison government's strong economy, we are able to invest a record $200 billion in completely transforming the ADF, and also to take our defence expenditure up to 2% of GDP, something that those opposites completely failed to do. But not only are we completely re-equipping the ADF, we are also the first government to fully engage and support Australian industrial capability through programs such as the $90 billion Naval Shipbuilding Plan, $20 billion to modernise the Australian Army's fighting vehicles, and $18 billion to deliver the next generation of strike and air combat aircraft systems. This is not only just an opportunity for primes, but also for small to medium Australian businesses, which are the engine room of the Australian economy. In fact, in the last financial year alone, over $8 billion of defence contracts were awarded to Australian SMEs, which equates to thousands and thousands of new high-tech jobs right here in Australia. A great example of this growth is that since the inclusion of the local industry capability plans in major construction contracts, now 80% of all subcontracts are going to local companies right across this nation, which directly benefits local businesses and injects over $3 billion into local economies right across our nation. In addition, the government is investing about $1.5 billion across the Next Generation Technologies Fund and also the Defence Innovation Hub. We are supporting defence industry, and we're backing them
Senator
in.
Reynolds,
and we're
time
backing
for the answer has expired. Senator Scarr, a supplementary question.
Can the minister outline to the Senate how Army's vehicle programs will create jobs for Australians and support Australian defence industry, particularly in my home state of Queensland?
Senator Reynolds.
Thanks, Mr. President, and thanks, Senator Scarr, again for that question. This government is investing over $20 billion in modernising Army's fighting vehicles and a further $5 billion in LAN 121 for logistics vehicles, which are now ready to commence exercises and training. But under the $5 billion Boxer Combat Reconnaissance Program, 211 vehicles will be delivered to creating an estimated 1,450 jobs across the country, and in particular nearly 350 jobs in Queensland. Over the 30-year life of the Boxer, Australian industry is expected to secure $10.2 billion of work to build and also to maintain the fleet. That, again, is thousands of jobs throughout the supply chain over that time. The majority of these vehicles will be built in Australia by Australians using Australian steel at Queensland's Rheinmetall Australian facility in Redbank. Local businesses, including Frontline Manufacturing and Rock Press for Mine Blast Protects,
Order. Senator Reynolds, time for the answers expired. Senator Scarr, a final supplementary question. Order. Senator Scarr.
Can the minister outline to the Senate how our air combat programs will create jobs for Australians and also support our Australian defence industry, particularly in my home state of Queensland?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr President. And as I said, this government has an incredibly proud record of delivering defence capability by Australians for Australians using Australian equipment and metal. The next generation of the Air Force strike and air combat capabilities is part of our record investment in the ADF. For the Joint Strike Fighter Global Supply Chain Program, over 50 Australian companies have already shared in $1.7 billion worth of contracts under this acquisition, and we are on track to deliver more than 5,000 Australian jobs for this project alone. Queensland-based companies, Ferrer Engineering in Brisbane, TAE Aerospace at Amberley and Heat Treatment Australia in Brisbane have been successful in winning JSF work, not only for the ones that we are acquiring, but for the global supply chain for the Joint Strike Fighter. And in addition, more than 90% of Boeing Australia's new $280 million contract to sustain and upgrade our Super Hornets and Growlers will be delivered by Australian industry.
Senator Reynolds, time for the answer has expired. Senator Cormann.
Thank you, Mr President. I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.